If you've read the second half of the seventh chapter of Ecclesiastes, you may recognize this as a somewhat challenging passage. And if you've discussed it in a group session, you may realize it has the potential to get a little sporty. But today we want to examine this, and our purpose is to give you something to meditate on to help you get closer to Jesus. So I'm going to read this in the King James Version, and I also have the American Standard Version on the screen here, so you can follow along in whichever translation you like. We're going to start in verse 23, where it says, "All this have I proved by wisdom. I said, I will be wise, but it was far from me. That which is far off and exceeding deep, who can find it out? I applied my heart to know and to search and to seek out wisdom and the reason of things, and to know the wickedness of folly, even of foolishness and madness. And I find more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and nets, and her hands as bands. Whoso pleaseth God shall escape from her, but the sinner shall be taken by her. Behold, this have I found, saith the preacher, counting one to find out the account, which yet my soul seeketh, but I find not. One man among 1,000 have I found, but a woman among all those have I not found. Lo, this only have I found, that God hath made man upright, but they have sought out many inventions." So to start, I think verses 23, 24, and 25 here, the point is really that the author is emphasizing the effort that he went to search and seek out this bit of wisdom, and by extension, the value of this wisdom, which is, I think, a deep point considering the larger context of the entire book of Ecclesiastes. So the point that he's making is really in these three "I find" statements. So in verse 26, he says, "And I find that women who trap you are more bitter than death." I think that's pretty self-explanatory and doesn't need a lot of additional commentary. Verse 27, though, he progresses in his search to seek out wisdom and says, "Behold, this have I found." And here, he's still talking about women and his relationship with women, his desire for a relationship with women. But he throws in, as a point of comparison, this fact that, one man among 1,000 have I found. Meaning, one true friend, one good, worthy man have I found among 1,000. It's very rare. But a woman among all those have I not found. So, at first glance, he seems really to be harshing on women here. He's already said that being trapped by a woman is more bitter than death, and here he's saying, he seems to be saying there aren't any good women, right? But as we progress, I think, ironically, he comes to rather the opposite conclusion, right? In verse 29, he says, "Lo, this only have I found." But by saying "only" here, he really depreciates these first two statements. Not to say they're not true points of fact, but that the wisdom that he found wasn't in those first two statements. It's really in this last statement, right? That you need to consider. and that is that God hath made man upright, but they have sought out many inventions. So, what does that mean? That means that God made the relationship between men and women upright, but man has invented a lot of expectations about that relationship and about women that are unrealistic and ungodly. So he's not really saying that there are no good women. Quite the opposite. He's saying his soul desires the wrong thing, that his desire has been corrupted by all these inventions. And what he's discovered is that it's impossible for women to meet his corrupted expectations. And so he's just never going to find what his soul desires until he fixes his problem. And if you consider our modern world with social media and Hollywood, and especially pornography, how those shape your expectation of your spouse's behavior, right? This is an enormous problem today, as evidenced not just by divorce rates, but by the trends in the dating among youth, like red pill movement and men going their own way, etc. Right? And you could see the inventions are not limited. Consider the 67 genders that we have now tempting kids, um, and the fact that artificial intelligence is starting to make this problem much more severe, right? So I'm not going to whine for 30 minutes about the state of the world. I think you understand the problem that the text is addressing here, um, and maybe even how much worse it is now than it was even then, right? But in the beginning, we said that our purpose here was to get closer to Jesus. So how do we do that? What's the connection here? Um, I think the connection is that God chose the pattern of marriage, the relationship between a man and a woman, as a model for our relationship with Him. The church is the bride of Christ, etc. I don't think I need to go into that in depth. That's very common understanding, right? But not necessarily something that people normally would draw out of this passage. So the wisdom here for you to meditate on is whether society's corruption of our expectations of marriage have in turn corrupted our expectation of our relationship with Jesus. And to turn that around, to fix it, what are Jesus' expectations for our behavior, and how should we apply that to fix our earthly relationships? Hopefully this is a helpful thought for you.